Okay, so hi everyone and welcome to our quick bite session on how to manage images in a manuscript or thesis. I'm Anne Goodfellow, one of the academic librarians here, and I'm
Kayla Maloney, and I'm the data analysis officer here at the library.
So together we're going to take you through today finding and manipulating an image for use in your manuscript, the logistics of inserting an image, and some examples of how to appropriately cite what you use. And as we have attendees in both humanities and science, hopefully we've got a variety of examples that will cover both. And finally, don't forget that the session's being recorded and it'll be available afterwards on the library's YouTube channel. So there are lots of free online sites such as Wikipedia Commons that you might have used where you can find open access images to reuse. However, grabbing an image off the internet is generally not good ethical or legal practice. And as well, you may not have an appropriate high resolution image that you need for your purpose. So for good quality images that are correctly cited and have a clear provenance, try some of our library image databases, and the link is provided here. So some of the databases include, there's Access Physiotherapy, there's an eBot Plant Science Collection, there's an art store for art images, there's a database called John Johnson's Collection of Printed Ephemera. So just to give you an idea that the subjects cover both sciences as well as arts and humanities. Another place that you might find interesting if you're not familiar with it is the National Library of Australia's Trove site. So this is for Australian material. So using the link, you can just put your keywords into the site and your results are categorized under separate headings, and they come back under pictures, photos and objects, for instance, under maps, or diaries, letters and archives. And if you click into an individual record, it will include the terms of use, and that outlines the copyright requirements for reproduction. So this is where you'll get details if you have to contact the copyright holder directly and who they are. And then you may have to email for further details or visit an organization's website and fill out an online request form. So start early because getting permissions often takes time. I've also included at the bottom this link. We created this for lecturers to find appropriate online open access material for their courses. However, you might find some of the links used useful for your own purposes. And there are tabs on how to find images and photographs, film and video, music scores, and more. Okay, so under Australian copyright law, when something is created, copyright protection automatically applies to it. And this means that no one other than the person or the organisation who hold the content or have created the content is allowed to reuse it. So this is why you need to get permission from the copyright holder to reproduce any images you want to use in your thesis. And especially if you make your thesis available by any open access platform, including Sydney eScholarship, ResearchGate or academia.edu. And especially if you plan to publish your thesis as a book or in another format such as a journal article. And there's a link there for further information that afterwards you can go and check. So sometimes creators and copyright holders may allow other people to reuse the content they've created. And in these cases, they create a reuse license for their content. And that states the ways in which the content can be reused. Some creators may even waive all their creative rights, copyrights, for a particular creation and dedicate the work to the public domain. And this table outlines the variety of Creative Commons licenses that you may have come across. So the top green option is the most open, so it's in the public domain with no rights reserved. And the bottom red option has the most restrictions in that all the rights are reserved. So just remember when you're looking for content, what kind of reuse license is applied to it. If it's not in the public domain, you won't be able to use that work in your thesis without explicit permission from the copyright holder. And finally, in relation to adding your thesis to the Sydney eScholarship Open Access Repository, you need to get copyright permission for all images used. If you can't, you can restrict access to your thesis, so it's only available via a University of Sydney login. However, the thing to consider with that is that being able to provide your thesis open access will ensure that it gets more downloads. So research shows that it's more accessible to users, and you'll also have it available to a wider community of researchers. And that's a good thing in terms of getting your name out there and if you're starting on an academic path. So now I'm going to hand over to Kayla, and she's going to take you through the tools to create and modify images.
All right, thanks, Anne. Actually, just on that last point with our particular thesis, talking to the repository manager, our open access theses are downloaded 10 times on average more than the closed access ones. So it really does make an actual difference. It's not us just saying, oh, people can use it. People do actually use it. So when you are putting images in your manuscripts, chances are you are either creating them yourself. So if you're creating images, there can be a wide range of reasons why you're doing that and tools that you're using. If you'd like some inspiration for the tools that you might want to use there, I've put up a link to the toolkit section of our data analysis and visualization guide. It's kind of letting you know different tools that are available to you at the University of Sydney. But yeah, basically creating images covers too many things for us to really get into here, so I've chucked that up as a resource. But if we're looking at modifying existing images, so as Anne was talking about, if you found something from one of those different sources and you'd like to make some maybe modifications to it before including it in your manuscript, some tools you might like to think about would be Adobe Illustrator. So this is if you're trying to modify sort of drawing style images. So it's a vector graphic software platform is what it's called, and it is available to all university staff and students, really, really useful for making those kind of nice drawings or modifying existing drawn figures. It is, however, a big commercial package, so while you have access to it while you're at the university, if you're moving on elsewhere, an open source and freely available option to use is Inkscape, and it's very similar to Illustrator in a lot of its functionality, so can be quite a good option if you are no longer here at the university. All right, lastly, Adobe Photoshop is more for if you're getting into modifying kind of your photograph style images rather than drawn style images. All right, with those tools in mind, let's talk a little bit more about the nitty-gritty technical details. So digital images come in two different flavors, your vectors and your rasters. Vector images are basically composed of a set of instructions that tell the computer how to draw the image. So they'll say, okay, draw a line here, it's this shape, it'll be about this thick, and make it black. And then over here, draw a circle, make it this big, and make it this shade of red, for instance. And then it can go on using a whole bunch of instructions like that to compose an image. Raster images, on the other hand, are made up of a whole bunch of small squares of different colors that, when they're put together, make an image. So I've got two little circles here. The one on the left is one that I drew in a vector graphic software thing and saved in a vector format. And then the one on the right is the same circle that I saved as a fairly low resolution raster format. So depending on how big your screen is, you might start to see a little bit of difference between the two circles. But as we zoom in on them and make things bigger, the difference really becomes quite apparent. So because the vector drawing on the left there is a set of instructions, when you zoom in or make it bigger, it just redraws it, and you keep the resolution really high. Whereas a raster image, as you zoom in and make it bigger, you actually start to be able to see all of those little squares that it's made up of. So raster images do tend to lose resolution as you zoom in on them. So it seems like vectors are a pretty good way to go, but there are definitely cases where vectors are the right choice and others where rasters are the right choice. So let's look at that a bit more. Vector images are really good for when you have these sort of drawn style visuals. So things are made up of lines, shapes, blocks of color, things like that. So a lot of your plots or graphs would tend to be a good choice for putting in vector format. So the file formats that you'll probably see here would be PDF, which probably you're mostly familiar with. A format called SVG, which it stands for Scalable Vector Graphics Format. And another one is AI, which is Adobe Illustrator format. It's a proprietary format, so unless you're actually working with Adobe Illustrator files, you probably won't see it, but since I've mentioned that as a tool that you might use, I'm mentioning it as a format that you might use as well. Raster images, on the other hand, you should use for when you have photographs, because there's just gradations in color that can be really fine all the way through the photograph, so that you really can't come up with a good set of instructions for drawing the image. It really is best composed of a bunch of different squares of color. Or, on the other hand, if you've got some sort of a data visualization where each pixel is representing a particular data value at that point. So these are good choices for raster image file formats. And you're probably familiar with a lot of these. JPEGs, TIFFs, and PNGs are all different raster image formats. All right, so we talked about modifying images a bit, and a really interesting thing about working with vector image formats is that when something has been saved as a vector image format, you can then go on and modify it using some of that software that I mentioned earlier, like Adobe Illustrator or Inkscape. So let's say we were going online, we found a nice image of the brain here, and we thought, it's good, but I want to highlight some slightly different regions, and then that would mean I'd want to change the text that's there. We can see that this one here is, oops, what's going on? There we go. This one is a SVG file. So that means it's in a vector format. We can probably edit it using vector software. So when we load it up in Adobe Illustrator here, you can see that all of that stuff is highlighted. When I clicked on it in Illustrator, it's all editable. I can then go and change it, and so change the colors, highlight different regions, change the text, all of that can be done. So a really good thing to look out for if you're wanting to modify an existing drawing that you found. So good things to look for here are PDF or SVG file extensions. One thing to note is that PDF can support both vector formats and raster formats. So, for instance, you've probably seen this. We've got a document, you import a photograph or something that's saved in a JPEG, and then you save the whole thing as a PDF. Something that has been saved in a raster format and then is then saved within a PDF, it's not going to become editable afterwards. So sometimes when you download a PDF, you'll go to open it in your vector graphics software and go, oh, it's not actually editable. So you don't know for sure until you try and click on it and see if you can highlight things. SVG will always be vector graphics. All right, so that's talking about modifying things. Once you've actually finished creating or modifying whatever it is you've created, you're going to want to save it in some format. So your best options when you're saving a vector image is to use a PDF. So PDF will save things as a vector, so it'll remain editable, keep that resolution even when zooming in and zooming out. And it's a format that a lot of software understands. So lots of things are able to save in PDF, and lots of things are able to read and use PDF. SVG is an alternative, and it does a good job of saving things as vectors. As mentioned, it's a vector graphics format, but a lot of programs don't know what to do with SVG, so it's not as flexible and usable as the PDF format. Sometimes you will need to save a vector in raster format just because the program that you're working with doesn't understand vector formats, or because you do want to make something that can't be changed or edited in the future. In this case, PNG is usually a good format to pick if you need to save something that was originally a vector as a raster. All right, once we look at our things that are started out as rasters, our best option here is the TIFF file format usually. So basically, TIFFs keep really high resolution. They don't throw away data when you save them. So they're a good choice for sort of long-term preservation and keeping all of the information that was originally present in your image there through the long term. However, as mentioned, it doesn't throw away any data when you save it. It means your file sizes can get quite large with TIFFs if you've got a really high resolution image. And sometimes, for whatever reason, you will need a smaller file size. So things on the internet need to load quickly. They need smaller file sizes, sometimes when you're sending people things. So in that case, if you need the smaller file size, saving it as a JPEG is a good idea because it does save smaller files. The reason it saves smaller files is that when it's saving and it compresses all the data down, it then throws out some of that information. So you actually do lose resolution over time with JPEGs. So definitely a good idea to save a high resolution JPEG once at the end for whenever you need that small file size, and then make sure you don't modify it and resave it over and over again, because each time you save it, the resolution will decrease because the compression will run again and it'll throw out more information. So yes, a few alternatives there, but do keep in mind that these guys are your best options for saving. All right, once we get to actually putting things into your manuscript, you might have some different file formats that you'll be using here. So this is because it kind of depends on what tool you're using to put your manuscript together, what will work the best for you. So if you're using something like Adobe InDesign, a really great program for creating good layouts. I did my thesis in there, did the layout for that, and it was quite good, so I definitely recommend it. For vector images, it's happy with PDFs, and it's also happy with TIFFs for raster images. So it goes with the ones that we've said are the best for saving images in. If, on the other hand, you like using sort of markup languages and you're using LaTeX to put your manuscript together, then when it comes time to sort of combine the whole thing and create the actual PDF using the command PDF LaTeX, then you will it's happy with PDFs for vector images, but not so happy with TIFFs as rasters. So use the JPEG format there. Again, save your high resolution JPEG as the last step, and then you can use that in your manuscript when you put it together there. If you're using Word to put your manuscript together, it tends to convert PDFs into raster formats when they're imported. So generally not the best idea to use a PDF for vectors, use an SVG instead. And it's also happy with TIFFs, so keep that one there. Word of caution with using Word for actually laying out your manuscript. It's great as a word processor. Typing things up, putting your references in, great tool for that. But once you start to do the final layout and put your images in, put tables in, do more complex formatting, it will try and do things and move things where you don't want, and you'll go, oh, I'm going to slide this over here. No, I'm going to put it over here. And actually, Word has decided to put it on a totally different page, and you wanted to put that back on the original page. Ha ha, never. So really, if you try and do much more than word processing using Word, you're going to end up quite unhappy, sorry to say. So Word, great for the typing up part, but once you're finished with that, then probably time to find a different tool. If you're just submitting your manuscript to a journal, obviously, where you're not the one doing the formatting, Word is fine. But for something like a thesis, where you are the one who then has to go and do all that formatting and layout, it's a really good idea to move on and find a different tool. And I definitely recommend Adobe InDesign is a good one to work with after you've done your word processing. All right, back to you, Anne.
Okay, great. So once you've sourced your image, you've got it in a great high resolution format. Don't forget that you need to reference your image and any diagram, that could be anything that you have as an image within your manuscript. So the library's referencing guide, the link is at the bottom, includes the main referencing styles used at the university, so check them out. There are also links to additional help options for individual referencing styles, and that will help you with tricky formats. So if you're not sure how to cite a map, for instance, you'll find the details there for a particular style. So depending on the referencing style, you might find that images, graphs, and tables are sometimes presented in an image list. So for instance, Chicago's 17th referencing style uses an image list that you have at the front of your thesis, and then the corresponding number and the full citation details are also presented under the image that you have in text, so on a particular page. So that shows you what Chicago looks like, which is a common humanities referencing style. This one is a Harvard referencing style, so you'll see that this is for a map and an online image. If, for instance, you found something that was a Creative Commons license, so instead of like the HTTP one in the online image, you might have the Creative Commons attribution listed there. So it would depend on your referencing style how you actually cite a particular work. And this is a Vancouver referencing style, so it's often used in medical sciences. You'll see that this is for a poster, and so you've got things like type and as well as a physical description of the item, which is slightly different to your standard book and journal article. Okay, so that's essentially it. We've got links and further readings here that you can have a look at. So the Creative Commons one goes back to that image of the attributions that you can check out if you find images you want to see if you can cite them. And I've added the Quick Bites recording at the bottom because there's lots of other great recordings you might want to check out. So in terms of theses, so your rights management and open access and copyright in your thesis. So you might find other things that will help you.
Yeah, so we've got a couple of questions that are coming up in the chat pod. So yes, if you do have any questions, feel free to type them in and we'll go through them here. So the first one is Adobe InDesign compatible with EndNote? Answer to that is not really, but I would say InDesign is just for that final formatting that you do. So basically do all of your typing, word processing, referencing in Word. And then once you actually come to the point where you go, okay, it's time, I've finished all of my typing, I'm going to put it up, figure out the layout, and put all the text in, then you take that text from Word and put it into InDesign, and it'll just keep your references as text. You can do minor text edits in InDesign, but it becomes a little bit clunky if you want to do major typing of things, and definitely referencing is much better with the EndNote Word integration. All right, is Adobe InDesign editable by someone else as well? For example, your supervisors. So I guess that would depend where you have the file stored. If you stored it on a drive that's shared with you and your supervisor, then they would be able to edit the file as well. So yeah, that one's pretty much just a matter of if you've stored it somewhere where both of you can access it, then both of you will be able to edit it. Ideas about Microsoft Visio. Visio is quite a good tool for creating things like flowcharts and diagrams. However, it isn't available to students, I believe, and for staff there's a small cost. It's not huge, but you can contact ICT about that. However, for students, I think it isn't available. So if you want to use a tool for making good flowcharts and diagrams, but are a student, I would recommend checking out LibreOffice. So that's L-I-B-R-E. I'll just type it in here. L-I-B-R-E, Office. So it's basically an open source, free to use version of the entire Microsoft Office suite. So they have a version of Word and Excel and PowerPoint, but they also have an open source version of Visio called Draw. I've used it, quite good. I'm pretty happy with what I've been able to come up with in it. So yeah, I would definitely recommend LibreOffice if you find you can't get a hold of a copy of Visio. And is Adobe InDesign best for merging all the chapters? It's pretty good for being able to sort of lay out things as you want them to. So I guess if you're looking at, you've got a bunch of documents with your various chapters in them and you want to put it all together, yeah, it's pretty straightforward to put all of the things into InDesign. You can even do, like, I think for the sections of it, I just did a big long copy and paste. So you copy all in your Word document, and then you have a bunch of text boxes in your InDesign thing, and you go paste, and then it hits the end, and there's a little plus sign that shows up, and so you say, okay, continue, and then it'll continue and flow on into a whole bunch of then chained text boxes that you can then change the formatting of those particular boxes. Maybe not the best description of me just waving my arms around, but hopefully it gives a bit of an idea of it's pretty flexible to change the layout however you want, and you can just basically copy and paste your text in really easily from a word processing thing. So yeah, it's quite a good tool. Any other questions that people had about working with images in their manuscripts? Thank you, yay! Well, thank you so much for coming, guys. Hope you enjoyed that, and as Anne said, it will be up online, so you can rewatch it to your heart's content.